Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Possibility Seekers. It's Monique DeMeo, rocking and rolling with a very special guest today, Van Adams. Let me tell you about Van. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Van held key positions at prestigious sports organizations, including the Buffalo Bills, United States Golf Association, and Sports Illustrated. Van began her career in intercollegiate athletics at an HBCU, Grambling State University, her alma mater in Louisiana, where she earned a bachelor's degree in biology pre-med and a master's in sports administration. Van worked with world-renowned Tiger football and baseball programs in the recruiting and scouting department and managed the annual spring exhibition game with the New York Yankees. She also worked for a D3 athletic program in upstate New York, where she led community partnerships and outreach efforts. With an impressive body of work inclusive of key areas of discipline and strong relationships with a roster of influential industry leaders and high-profile professional athletes, Van identified a niche in the retired professional athlete community and became a respected marketing agent, negotiating deals for her clients, developing their brand strategy, advising on development projects, and philanthropic initiatives. And in 2004, hung out her shingle establishing the Van Adams Sports Group. In 2012, Van launched Gathering on the Greens to empower women to play golf for business and think differently about networking through on-course golf experiences and professional development workshops. A recognized leader in the industry, Van was named to the top 25 women entrepreneurs and small business owners list, Crain's New York Notable Women in Sports Business, among others. While athletes in sports are central to the business today, the expanded client roster includes all stars of non-sports related in areas of industry, small business and entrepreneurs, to help them grow, develop, and market their businesses. Welcome, Van. That was great. Oh my God, you're so impressive.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Monique.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. So there's so many things that I'm sure my listeners and viewers want to unpack with you. And one of them is, can you share a moment from your early career that kind of solidified your passion for sports marketing and management?
Yeah, I think it was just working on sponsorships, partnerships, activation, seeing how brands come together to impact consumers and audiences as well, and leveraging sports and entertainment to do that.
Now, you yourself, I didn't actually talk to you about this when we were chatting on the phone. Did you personally have always a passion for sports and athleticism yourself?
So yeah, I stayed active. Growing up, the parenting style was you're going to be busy, do well in school, you go to school, you do something that's social and civic in the community, you do something that's athletic, you do something that is artistic. You don't do them all at the same time. But, as different seasons go, it's like, okay, well, now you're going to be in band. Okay, now you're going to try this. And I think the idea, for that generation was keep the kids busy. Plus, it was different because arts in school, you could take music classes in school, you could take acting, there were plays. So there was lots of things to keep you busy and stimulate the mind. And I played sports and volleyball and track, and there we are.
Yeah. You grew up in Louisiana, right?
No, I grew up in upstate New York, but I have family from the southern region. Yeah.
Got it. So how was that like? Did you have to navigate challenges and barriers just being a woman, notwithstanding a woman of color, in the rise that you saw in your career? Did you feel like that was a thing for you?
I think naivete is something that is understated. And what I mean by that is you don't know what you don't know when you're doing it, right? And so it wasn't until years later, looking back, that I realized, oh, I'm the only woman here at all, right? Of any color, or I'm the only person of color of any gender in the room. But while I was doing it, being the one and the only, and still today, sometimes I find myself being the only in the room, fewer rooms, but still the only. I think I look back and think that I was so preoccupied with work, and I was so preoccupied with the deadline and whatever task was in front of me, that I didn't look up long enough to realize there was only one of me there. That came a little bit later in my career when I started to, have those questions and like, well, who can I ask about this? And how do I get to the next step? And then you start to notice, you're like, wait, no one here has my path quite exactly.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I was interviewing a sports psychologist way back in the beginning of this podcast. I think it was last year. Her name is Christina Versari, and she teaches at San Diego State University. And her point was she's also like me, an immigrant, and she's a Hispanic woman, well, considered Brazilian. So technically, according to the check boxes, that's not actually Hispanic, but we'll table that for a minute. She's South American, with English not being her first language. And she said the very similar thing that you said and that I experienced, which is I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't give it any thought until I had to give it thought because I was busy doing my job and doing it well.
Yeah, you're groomed. You move through, different life phases and processes, and you do the task that's in front of you. My goal was when I got my master's degree, I wanted the business side of things, but then I was going to go to med school. I'd majored in pre-med. So the plan was to be an orthopedic surgeon. But in the middle, you get derailed because life starts happening and you develop these other passions. You're like, well, I really do like this side of the business. And I did a lot of media relations and communications, and I enjoyed that. I enjoy, starting something from scratch and being responsible for seeing it through to the end, or taking a client's idea, you know, bringing it to life. And so when you look up, you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to go to med school. Like maybe that's not my path. The STEM aspect,
Right.
and I went to an engineering college preparatory high school. And so that very specific way of doing things in order and process, I think that is something that's innate and that has helped me throughout my career.
No, I can only imagine how that has helped you because whilst organizational skills are half the battle, like they say showing up is half the battle. Well, if you show up and you don't have a plan, you're kind of only doing half of it. So that brings us to great like leadership lessons from sports to business, drawing from your experience with organizations like the Buffalo Bills and Sports Illustrated, which are amazing brands and everybody listening knows. What are the key leadership lessons sports have taught you that apply across all the professional settings, especially for women in leadership?
Yeah, I think that it comes back to your skill set, right? Know what you know and work on honing that, right? And then that's your lane. That's where you operate. And I think when we talk about leaders know how to galvanize other people for a common goal, right? And so that's kind of the basis of if you play team sports, whether you play recreationally, amateur level, or professional. It's about everybody playing their position for the common goal, right? And so you don't necessarily have to go out to dinner with all your coworkers and all your teammates and be BFFs, but you have to rely on them to get their job done so that you can get your job done, right? So that at the end of the day, the objectives are met. And so I think, when you talk about leadership lessons, every organization that I worked for before I started my own business, that the lesson was know what you know and do. And when you do that well, you'll find that life gets a little easier at work. Opportunities seem to find you because one thing about business is everyone wants the top talent. Everyone wants the person who knows what they need to move their business forward.
So, be really, really good at what you do. So own your skill set and lean into it.
Also, know what you don't know and be willing to learn that if necessary, right? Because we're not going to know everything and have all the answers, but you have to have that level of awareness to know, hey, this isn't my wheelhouse. I need to go talk to Monique because she knows how to do that.
Right. So it sounds like you're also espousing a notion of intellectual curiosity, which is my big theme. I can't understand people who aren't intellectually curious. That just makes me a little uncomfortable. Really? You have no questions? You have no questions? Really? You know it all? Really? And then it sounds to me that you're espousing play nice in the sandbox, like know what you know, share what you know, ask for help when you need it, and be clear about what you don't know.
Right. And the asking for help is something that where a lot of women have some challenges, right? They'll just take the burden on, do it all themselves. It's like, no, you have to know when to ask for help. You have to know when to raise the caution flag. If you're not going to meet a deadline, You can't tell your team that you're not going to meet that Friday at noon deadline on Thursday night. Like there had to be signs along the way that you were going to, miss the deadline or you were having some challenges. So you have to be okay with saying, I'm going to need some help to get to this deadline.
Bless you, because that is my pet peeve. I do not want anybody on my team or extended team or, clients to come back to me and say, I didn't do this part of it. Therefore, everything, it's a domino effect. You got to give me a heads up and vice versa, right? Like, come on now. We're all in this together. If you tell me there's a leak in the boat and we're literally in the middle of the ocean, you should have told me that when we were at the dock. You know what I mean? So I want to talk about mentorship and growth. You're reflecting, you have roles at NYU. You've had roles at NYU and Manhattanville College. How have those experiences as an educator and mentor shaped your approach to leadership and personal development, overall? And maybe if you could share a story where that mentoring experience has impacted a student or somebody's professional trajectory, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, when I was an adjunct professor, there were two things that were important for me. It was one, to make sure that the students understood from a practical standpoint what really happens in business, what the roles that they think they aspire to, what are those responsibilities? Like, what are their job duties? What do they actually do? Because a title is just a title. And sometimes that can be misleading when you're a college student looking for a job. And so I wanted them to understand from a practical standpoint how sports business operates, but I also wanted them to understand the theory behind it. And I was quite intentional about inviting guest speakers, taking them to certain organizations and facilities so that they can see and experience hands-on how all of the parts work together. And I think from that, I have had numerous students say to me, thanks, I didn't think about it that way, or I just want to be a sports agent, but I didn't also realize I could do other things, right? And so I think, when you're in a position to shape the minds and influence that next wave of industry leaders, it's really important to listen to them and understand, what do they need? What do they want to know?
And it's also, I think, what you bring up too is this idea, which I talk a lot about this with clients, and that is content without context is useless. So by virtue of you bringing them into the fold and bringing them into a situation where a job or a career decision or a career choice could be, could show up for them in a real world situation, then they kind of get it. Like, what does a sports agent really do? Is it really Jerry Maguire that I saw in the movie, or is it something different? And what are my choices and what are my swim lanes, and how can I combine swim lanes if I like more than one thing like you do? So I really commend you for not only being an adjunct professor, but giving them content and context.
And again, like, academia is about the theory, the textbook, right? So you got to understand in marketing, what are the 5 Ps? Like, you need to know what they are. You're going to know them formally, or you're going to learn them hands-on. But you need to know them because it influences all of your decisions. But then once we get beyond that, we would go and look at headlines. What's in the news? Who's in the news? What's happening on social media? Who just got a shoe deal? Who's building a new facility? And then we would talk about all of those things and what that really means in real time.
My adjunct professors in college and graduate school were my favorites because I felt like they really had a handle on what was going on in the real world.
Because that's where they are. They're working.
Yeah, they're doing it. They're like, okay, I'm done with the guy that's going to talk to me about like I remember, I can only hear about Peter Drucker for so many years. After a while, I'm like, okay, can somebody tell me what's really? So I find it's refreshing to see somebody that's actually doing it and being successful at it, so that you can learn from. And they also share mistakes. Like, I'm sure you shared, like, this is a flop for a brand because they did X and Y and they should have done A and B.
Right. They say experience is the best teacher, right? So while you have your full-time professors who are quite scholarly and knowledgeable, you bring in your adjunct professors, right? Who many of them are scholarly and knowledgeable in a different way. So they get a different perspective, right? And so, like I said, it's all about shaping the minds and feeding their curiosity.
I feel like the pure academics can teach you how to learn. And then I feel like the practical scholars can teach us how to do it in the real world.
And you need both. You need that blend of both, right?
Tell us briefly, because I know the way we connected was the nonprofit organization WISE, Women in Sports and Events, and your role in the New York City Metro chapter leadership and kind of like what that organization does. And just a commercial break.
Yeah, no. So WISE is focused on providing women in sports business with career sources to advance their career, no matter what stage, right? And so the NYC Metro chapter, we have members who are newly minted with their graduate degrees or undergraduate degrees, with very little, actual hands-on work experience. And we have members who are semi-retired, right? Because they never really retire, but they kind of retire and then they come back and advise. So we have a large range of women, and WISE provides various tools to help them, even holistically, from the wellness aspect, coaching circles, mentorship programs. Our chapter does very intentional networking meetups, right? Panel discussions. So bringing and assembling topics where we can highlight some of the best and brightest in our industry that can talk about, a variety of topics. While our members are there, and some of our events are open to the public. And so everyone can come together, build community, learn and grow, and expand their networks.
That's great. So for those of us who are listening in the metro area, there are events in New York. There all the time. And what is how does membership work and what does it cost? So we can tell our listeners what that is and what's the website URL?
The simplest way is WISE, nycmetro.org. They can sign up as individuals, on their own. They can get their companies to sign up with 5 or more people. But yeah, check out the website. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of activities that go on throughout the tri-state area, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York City, and all of its boroughs.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk about vision and persistence. Starting and sustaining a consulting company for over 2 decades is no small feat, right? I know that firsthand. What vision drove you to start your own business, and how have you maintained, your resilience and your persistence through the evolving landscape of sports marketing and management?
Yeah. So, I think what drove me was I saw the opportunity. And so I moved forward without hesitation to fill the gap. And what I mean by that is I had worked, as for several organizations, United States Golf Association, Sports Illustrated. I was working on campaigns with brands for the Olympics. And then in the middle of that, I was plotting my next move. I'm still thinking, well, do I now apply and go to med school? Do I really need the law degree? And you think, well, no more loans, no more money spent on education, because now I have a lot of experience and I met a lot of people who were quite successful, happy with what they were doing. They didn't have all those extended degrees, but what they had was skill. And so I thought, okay, what can I do next? So I had come to a place where I knew a lot of athletes because I worked with them on so many different, areas of the business. And they began to come to me and say, Van, can you help me with my foundation? Van, this company wants me to be a spokesperson. Can you read this contract? So there were little things like that. And I just started picking up these projects. So like true story, an entire year went by and I hadn't realized that I wasn't with a company, but I was the company. Because I was taking on projects with Hall of Famers and MVPs and a lot of high profile athletes, working with them on various projects. And then I would hire out people to help me.
So you were the subject matter expert / trusted advisor. They trusted you to do the right thing for them, or their project, or their brand, or their event, or their whatever. And then you made it happen. You're like, okay, I got you. I understand what you need. Let me get you the team assembled, right? And so you were quarterbacking their initiatives, which is kind of cool. So when did you realize you're like, wait, I need to make my own company now? Let's make this official.
Well, when it came time to file taxes, and my accountant is like, what are all these 1099s? Right? What are you doing? I'm so busy that I didn't pause because different, like I said, different athletes they had. I want to do a celebrity golf tournament. Can you orchestrate that? Hey, I want to do a fishing tournament. Can you do that? Hey, I got an idea. I want to pitch, an apparel line. And so again, I was busy. I was calling on other people who I knew who had skills in certain areas, right? And so then I was hiring them, paying them from my fees. And I thought my limited working knowledge at that point, well, I write that off, right? Because that's what you do. And that's when my accountant said, yeah, no, let's pause. Let's pause and let's back up and form the company. Let's incorporate and let's take care of all the paperwork. You're already running a business, like you're already doing it. Now let's pause and reshape that. And then I did that, and I haven't looked back since.
So, are you with me on the statement that I make, which is I am certifiably unemployable?
I think, and again, every phase, every so often, most entrepreneurs wake up and say, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Because there are challenges and things get tough and it's hard. And you're like, I'm just going to go back in house. I'm just going to go find a nice job and sit there and do one thing. And that's it. And then something always happens and we say, okay, never mind. Never mind, right? I'll keep doing this. I think sometimes the hard part for entrepreneurs to take a corporate job again is just the bureaucracy. And the decision making is a lot slower when you have to have so much buy-in just to get to the answer that you've already proposed.
I told you that's the way we should be going 2 weeks ago, and now you're telling me you're having a fourth meeting about the same thing. Okay, I'll.
Right. And it's in that, that level of, and I get it when you're working in more communal environments, you need the buy-in of everyone, right? So totally respect that. But when you're accustomed to moving at a bit faster pace, you get things done, you accelerate a bit faster. And I guess that can be, that can have pros and cons too, because you might miss something and then you have to course correct. But at least you can get your projects moving. You can make a decision and not have to wait on five other people's meeting schedule to line up so that they can basically say, yeah, we should do what you proposed.
It's so funny that you said that because not more than an hour ago, my partner slash husband, business partner, life partner said to me, I said, oh, by the way, I got authorization approval on this, project contract, whatever. He goes, haven't didn't they ask for that within a week and now they've taken a month to think about it and finally sign it? I said, uh-huh.
Yeah, that like I said, that is the part it's really frustrating. You're like, come on, like let's go.
Let's go. So basically, so what you're saying is you're a woman of action. You're a woman of getting things done. And when you say you mean what you say what you mean, which is why we completely connected the minute we met. And so I talk about this in my book in the career slash job section. It's making sure that you're aligned with who and what you're doing professionally. Because if you're the kind of personality that gets really frustrated, I'm the kind of personality that I can't do one thing at a time. I get incredibly bored. I can't. I physically cannot do one thing at a time or do one brand or one project and let that be my box. Like if you put me in a box, like nobody puts, you know, baby in the corner or whatever, I can't.
But then there's some people who need to be that way.
Yeah, so they should. I mean, I think that what you are bringing up is simply the takeaway that you need to know who you are and how you are happiest in order to get in alignment with the job or the career or the company or the brand or the project that aligns with who you are. Because if you're like me, you're never going to be happy with one thing. If you're like somebody who needs that security and that predictability and that cadence that is in that manner, you're not going to be happy doing what I do because I would make your hair spin or your hair curl or your hair fall out or whatever.
Yeah, there's some people who need a very structured environment in order to be motivated. There's some people who the remote working, as we've seen post pandemic and during the pandemic. And I remember I was telling someone during the pandemic, I was like, I've been remote working for quite a while. So I can tell you that it does work, right? I have a lot of contractors and consultants who work on projects. We do events all over the world. So I know that it works because I've been doing it. I've been doing it. But that's not for everybody. Some people really need to get up, go someplace and have that communal environment with other people, that energy. And that's totally okay. Meanwhile, you have other people who they're not going to work at 7 a.m. or 9 a.m., but come 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're energetic, they're enthused, they get all of their work done, and they might work till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And so if you're an employer and you don't really care about how they work, you care about the quality of their work, then I think that that's something that you could consider.
You're absolutely right. We've been virtual since 9/11. That was my trigger event for pulling. I was subletting space in Manhattan in Soho, and my office building had a direct line of sight to the Trade Center towers, or the lack thereof. And I wasn't there that day, thank God. Neither was my husband, who at that time worked in the tower. But I was like, why are we doing this? And nobody cares where I am. And as long as we deliver, and then surrounding yourself with people that can operate that way is the secret.
And also, I will say, surrounding yourself with people who understand both sides of the coin, right? You have to be able to manage your workforce, right? If you've trusted that you have hired the right people for a specific role, then let them do their job. If you give them a deadline, it's Friday at noon. I don't need to keep asking you every day how you're doing. But now you start to miss Friday at noon, and you're demonstrating that you're not reliable or dependable in that context. Now that's a different story. But for the most part, you give people a deadline, they'll get it done.
Right. As long as you can deliver on time and on budget and what as promised, I'm good. Yeah, but not a lot of people can do that. I have a particular client who she can't get over when she can't IM somebody. When she's at her desk and she sees somebody out or not checked in, she gets apoplectic. It's a thing with her. She's a more of a clock watcher. And there are people like that. So depending on how they're wired, I think, the corporate versus freelance versus entrepreneurial paths are appropriate for how you're wired. You just have to really know who you are.
I'll also say that, particularly after the pandemic and during that time when there was a lot of movement, a lot of people shifting, a lot of people got the aha moment and said, now is the time for me to go and do what I always wanted to do. Now is the time for me to leave the big city and go and take on a more, quieter, calmer life. There were people who said, I'm going to start my own business. And they would call for advice. And I would think, I don't think, like, that's not how you really start a business. Maybe you should just freelance or just take the time, take a sabbatical, right? Because 1 in 3 businesses will not be in business in 3 years, right? That's just the statistics. And then 1 in 2 will have shut their doors by year 5. And so I think that when we take the leap, you have to take the leap with a very calculated hand, right? And so while my hand wasn't calculated, I had the good fortune of it coming to me. Once I started rolling, I recognized that there was no turning back. So now what's your plan? And you have to be disciplined in that. And so I always say, when people aspiring entrepreneurs, you're going to need to know a lot about a lot of things. You don't have to do all of the things, but you need to know how all of the things get done so you can know who to hire. And sometimes they struggle with that. And then you find they start a business, and then by the end of the year, they're looking for a job, but they want to keep the business on the side, right? Because there's so much that you have to do. It's like you're either going to be all in and be committed or not.
There's a great book called The Great Game of Business. And it's also just brings to light that just because you're good at a thing, you could talk about a baker or, a designer or whatever. It doesn't mean you could be a great business owner. Sometimes those are mutually exclusive. Sometimes they're together, but just because you're great at something doesn't mean that you should have a business around that something. So
You knew I was a great
I did
baker.
not know that.
Yes, and people ask me all the time, they're like, when do you open a bakery? And I'm like, you know what? That used to be on my plan. I wanted to open a bakery. However, I know about me, I can bake all day, all
But that's
night,
for you.
but that's for me and because I want to do it. I don't know that I physically want to do the baking every day by demand, but I can go hire some good chefs.
I love that thinking. That's exactly how I feel about certain things.
Like maybe I can take this and have some seasonal product in one of the supermarket chains or something, but
Or you could just sell to your friends and family, on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Hey guys, Van's got some inventory. Let's go.
that keeps me being the popular kid, I'll tell you.
As long as you can you do some gluten-free stuff for me? I can eat it.
I do. I have a dear friend and she's gluten free and I make her flourless chocolate cake all the time.
Okay, I'll be right over. Okay, hold that thought.
You're right. Just because you enjoy something, just because someone's telling you that you're good at something, that doesn't always mean that you're going to be successful at monetizing it.
Perfect. So great segue to the next thing I want to talk about, which is creating career opportunities in spaces. As someone who has worked in various capacities within sports, from collegiate athletes, major sports media, how do you approach creating opportunities in spaces for women and also women and minorities as well in sports? I want you to share something that you're particularly proud of. I was personally very impressed with Gathering on the Green or Birdies for Business. I wanted you to kind of expound on that because they're cool.
Yeah. So Gathering on the Greens, I started that back in 2012. And it started initially as just groups of women from my network. I would get them together, we'd go out to a golf course. I would show them the basics and then let them swing, putt, and we go and have brunch. And then it became a demand, right? They became to expect that are we doing it again this weekend? And they would tell more people. And so my entrepreneurial gene said, there is a need for this. But I also knew from my experience working in golf, my experience with working on celebrity tournaments and things like that, is that women were so underrepresented. And like, you got to be kidding me. Women don't play. They don't like to play. No, I know there's barriers to entry, access. A lot of people did not grow up that way. Playing golf, that they weren't exposed to that, right? Golf courses, you need land, you need acreage. And so if you didn't grow up in an environment where there's a lot of land, you probably never saw a golf course, right? And so I totally, understand that. But what really I think spoke to me was there were colleagues of mine who worked at major organizations, major companies who were sponsoring these outings. They weren't showing up. They were sending people in their department or their office, but they weren't showing up, or they would show up for dinner. They'd come for the lunch. And I thought this is a huge missed opportunity, right? So there were a few things there at play. One, you do not have to play well because most people who go out and play, it's for leisure, right? It's for exercise, it's for wellness, it's just for networking, it's just for being outside, getting some vitamin D. So you just need to know the basics, right? And most of us can learn the basics. We can teach you that quickly, give you a book, you can read it, and you can walk the course, right? And so I started, organizing Gathering on the Greens, inviting women out to play. They would learn, about the game, and then they would actually go and play. So it's a lot different than going to a simulator or indoor facility, which are great. Like that's a great way to learn the game and get in the game. But if you actually want to play on turf and on the grass, you have to walk the course, right? You have to kind of the touch and feel aspect. Otherwise, you go and you practice, and then you don't know how to transfer indoor to outdoor. I had a woman say to me once, she said, I played golf when I was younger. I have golf clubs. They're in my closet. And I've never taken them out because one, I don't have time. It can be time consuming, right? And she's like, and I don't want to look back.
Oh God.
I don't want to look back. And I'm like, and I totally get it. No one wants to look back. But once you come and you see your counterparts, everyone looks the same. So you can all look bad together.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's right.
But what you get from that is you have a different way to think about networking and those opportunities and meeting people outside of your immediate circle, right? And that's a barrier for most people, but women in particular. The venturing out beyond your immediate circle, your office, your network, expanding your network. That's where your opportunities come from. And then so companies will hire me to come out and do these full day experiences for their leaders and their executives or whomever they want to invite, right? So you no longer have to put the burden on someone in the office to say, put a day together, right? Because this one is a little bit different and it's very specific and intentional about the professional development piece, the networking piece that that we build in. There are lots of exercises that go on throughout the day, little subtle moments that people now are getting the opportunity to connect in ways that they probably would not have.
I needed you so badly about 28 years ago. when I was running Brand Week, and I'm like, I'm gonna do the first women's golf outing ever in publishing, and that it was great, but my boss hated me for that. And now you're monetizing a need, and you're addressing a market gap, and you're doing well at it. And I'm just really happy and gratified to hear that you're getting more women into the sport. As we're watching the LPGA this weekend, I was thinking about you and how, you're spreading the good word. Tell us about you. Are you ready to talk about Birdies for Business?
And so Birdies for Business, I started that during the pandemic, the 2020. That year, as most people, businesses took a really hard hit because people were not getting together. Although golf is that sport that you could do and you could socially distance, you're outdoors. But because there was so much uncertainty in the workforce, people were just on pause, right? Like, we don't want to be outside playing golf and we don't know what's happening in the world. So you totally get that. And so again, I was able to pivot and I launched a web series. And so I went and I identified women from all sectors of business because that's who participates in Gathering on the Greens. They're all types of women. And we just had conversation, Birdies for Business, a 30-minute chat. And we would talk about different topics. I had people from major quick service restaurants, from the oil industry. I had engineers. I interviewed, athletes, Olympians, like all kinds of women, just having these conversations and giving leadership lessons. But not in a preachy way, because no one likes to be lectured to, but just conversations, because everyone's path is different.
That's right. So talk to me a little bit about balance and personal growth. In my book, and I don't know if you've had a chance to peruse it yet, I always tell people you don't have to read it. And I always forget to tell people you don't have to read it from beginning to end. You read the chapters or the secrets that you're having most trouble with first. But I talk about the importance of intentional living and finding a balance, right? How do you balance the demands of your career, your leadership roles, your personal life, and continuing to grow and thrive in everything that you do and touch?
Yeah. Some days it doesn't feel like I'm thriving.
I know.
I don't feel like I'm thriving at all. And that's just like the human nature side of it. But I would say for me, there's the word balance and like, there's not really balance. There's not really harmony. Those are a little bit unrealistic, I think, to reach. But I do believe in prioritization. And so if you prioritize what's important to you now for this moment, what's your goal, then you can do consistent acts to get to that goal for this moment, right? You're not going to be all things at once that you're going to be 5-star at, right? It's just, you're not. And so if you think about it, maybe in terms of seasons, so the spring, I'm really focused on this. Okay, now the fall, I'm going to shift and I'm going to focus on this a little more. But being realistic, on the outcome, right? You're not going to be at your kid's soccer game every week. Like, can you? Right? So if you can, then where are you going to make the adjustment someplace else? Because if you're going to be there, be present. And so that's something that I really, had to grow into understanding. It's like, figure out what's the priority. What is the thing that I most immediately need to do? And then where's the list? Everything that's not that, I can't do. There's only so many times in a day. And understanding that might disappoint some people, including yourself. But what's the alternative? Because you can't do everything. The other thing that I say, particularly to women, is be comfortable saying no, right? So if you know that something is one more thing on your plate that you cannot do, if you simply cannot, then you have to say no. But if there's something that can be on your plate or is being offered to you, it's an opportunity. When you evaluate that, what is there an upside there? And if there's an upside, be quicker about giving the yes, because everything is figure outable. Everything, you can figure it out.
Potentially you're going to read certain sections of the book and say, I could have written that because that's exactly how you just said literally what I talk about. You can't have you can't have it all at the same time, all the time. Can't have that.
Like I said, very process oriented. And I know that about me. Checklists, everything that I said I wanted to do, particularly moving through elementary school, high school, college, just keep checking the boxes. But then when you get into life, sometimes you can't check those boxes. It's like, how are you going to have 2 PhDs, 4 kids, a dog, all of these things in 6 years? Like, mathematically, it doesn't work. And so there's an extra pressure that we place on ourselves, particularly high achievers or overachievers. And we have to get to a place for our mental health and well-being. We have to get to a place to say, okay, pause. What is really the priority?
Exactly. You have to protect your yeses with a bunch of no's, and you have to protect. Yeah. Anyway, so moving right along, our last question, because I'm having so much fun. I'm blowing through time here. Advice for aspiring leaders. What advice would you give to young women aspiring to leadership roles, either in sports marketing and management or a male-dominated industry, which we know of boatload most are? How can they harness their unique voices and strengths to break barriers and create impactful and meaningful careers, in your opinion?
Yeah, I just say, find what you're good at, find your passion, and what you're good at today might evolve next year. But whatever you're good at in the moment, give that your energy, give that your all. I don't think that people who break barriers set out to break a barrier, right? They somewhere in the journey, they realize, oh, I've broken some barriers here. But when you're passionate about something, let that be your North Star, and have a skill set. You have to have a skill set, right? It's like the opportunity, will come to you, but are you prepared for it? Because if not, then you'll waste the opportunity, right? And so, well, you need a little bit of luck. You do. You need a little bit of access to people who can give you access, but you also need to have talent that you've honed, so that you can create your own luck, so that you can have an opportunity to be whatever it is you're aspiring to be.
Very good. That was a masterclass. So lastly, the only question I haven't asked you yet that I really want to ask you, your 30-year-old Van, what are you going to say to her if you had an opportunity to talk to your 30-year-old Van? What would you say?
It's okay that you didn't do everything on your checklist before you turn 30.
Oh, I kind of like that.
It's really okay. You got a lot of time to do a lot of things.
Good job. I love it.
Don't have to do it all before you're 30.
Or 40 or 50. And I'm going to stop there because I'm getting a little too personal now. Just kidding. All right. So thank you, Van Adams. This was a pleasure, a delight, and a true lesson in leadership and sports, in just showing up, and great advice. Thank you so very much. Thank you, possibility seekers. I appreciate you being here. Make it an awesome day. And thank you, Van Adams. Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique DeMeo, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it, or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at MoniqueDeMaio.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.